My name is Rick de Groot, and my favorite feature in Power Query is the ability to build your own functions. Welcome to Power Query Magic.
Welcome, Rick. Thank you for coming on the show.
So great to see you. Thanks. And we've been seeing each other online for a little bit before already, haven't we?
Yeah. You know, you're on LinkedIn a fair bit, posting. I've seen more of your Power Query videos coming up. So you're being active in that space.
Yeah, that's been a really big part of the community, actually, the LinkedIn area. I've only started at the beginning of this year. And I never actually thought that was gonna blow up so quickly, from 1,000 followers to I think it's almost 10,000 now. But I feel like a big part of the community is on LinkedIn as well, definitely.
Yeah. I find LinkedIn and Twitter together. I find that they've got different feels to them. So I quite like the Twitter's a bit more lighthearted, and there's a bit more other stuff going on there.
Yeah.
But if you just follow the right, if you stick to just following, technical people, Twitter's pretty good. I quite like that as a concept too. I'm a big LinkedIn fan.
I'm not on Twitter too much yet, I have to admit. I feel like there's a lot going on, and I just haven't really found out yet what Twitter is used for most. I see a lot of short tweets for it, and what kind of content do you put on there if you do post?
Well, it is sharing, it's sharing your videos and everything like that, your standard content. But it just feels more like you can just post something you've just come across, normally moaning about something that's not working, or some feature that you're annoyed with, and just quickly commenting on other people's posts as well. And there's a bit more of a, there's a bit more fun going on with it as well. People just posting memes and other silly little things.
Yeah.
But I think it has a little sense of community in there with it. I like it.
I would usually see a lot of people on bigger events also using Twitter a lot. Like every time a new big feature was announced, they would tweet it out there. So it feels a bit quicker, and you don't have to review your posts too much. Like you just spread your thoughts as they come up.
Yeah, there is no edit, so you can delete what you've posted, but there's no edit. So unless you pay, like, I don't know, I think it's $5 for Twitter Blue or something crazy.
Oh, that's the thing now too. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you can call back your post. But yeah, there we go. So your YouTube channel then, BI Gorilla. Look, I've obviously got to ask about the name. If you're going to name your channel something like that, you're going to be hounded for the rest of your career by people asking you, "Hey, what about the name?"
That's definitely true. Like people outside of the BI space, they even wonder about the bee gorilla, they say in Dutch, like as if it's like a bisexual gorilla, something like that.
Right. Yeah,
and other people are like, is it about a big gorilla, or what is that all about?
Big gorilla, yeah.
And the truth is, like a while back, I think that was 2015 when I first got some thoughts on releasing a blog, and it was quite tough to find a .com domain. Like I really wanted to just have a .com domain at first and see how that would go. And I realized that a lot of the names that I was looking for, I was really just brainstorming on a piece of paper at first. But a lot of those big names, they were simply taken, or you could acquire the big domains for like a lot of money. Let's say 4,000 or 5,000 money for a domain.
Yeah.
So for me, that was the brainstorming back then. And my first blog was actually called excelgorilla.com. And I'm not sure if you've seen it when it was out there, but it had a lot less content, and it was more focused on the Excel space. So that domain started with excelgorilla.com, and at some point I just felt like that Excel part really made it feel as if it was only about Excel. And I think it was only like a year ago or so, like 1 or 2 years ago, that I decided to rebrand it. And
Right.
Well, it just made sense to change the Excel part to BI, because it could still cover some parts of Excel, right? And at the same time, it would also involve like the business intelligence platform. And then actually I got the inspiration from the book of the Italian guys, Alberto Ferrari and Marco Russo, because I noticed in their books that they had these short links which said SQL.bi. And then I was thinking like, hey, that's pretty cool to have a BI domain somewhere. And as it turned out, the BI domain is owned by a country like Burundi, and they acquired
Okay.
all these BI endings of a domain. So you really had to look good before you could buy one of those. And with that, I actually thought like, well, let's keep it just short and quick. And yeah, with the rebrand, Gorilla.bi just came to exist. That's really how it came about.
Yeah, yeah. And so how long? So because interesting, you said rebranding because I sort of scanned back on your blog and saw that one of your first, or it seemed that the first post I came across was something to do with how to use some product in Excel.
That's right.
Does that sound about right? So and then they clearly became a bit more Power Query focused quite quickly, and sort of you got into that side of things.
And I think literally with all the posts that I'm working on, they often relate to the projects that I'm doing at the moment. I'm not a full-time blogger. I usually do this for like a day a week, and I used to do it in the evenings and for the weekends. So you'll see a lot of content that I'm currently working on with customers actually. For example, in the last
it's inspiration then.
a lot of inspiration, yeah. So some product was something that current customer really needed for their Excel solutions. But as you'll find out on my blog for the last few weeks, it's a lot about date calculations, working day calculations, and Power Query, because that's something that's just very relevant for a current customer. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably very similar for me. Something that comes up, it'll just trigger an idea for, and you want to make a note of it as well to some extent to remind yourself too of how you've done this thing. So it's quite a useful resource for yourself.
Yeah. And the good thing is that if something worked for yourself, then if you note it down, then at least you'll know the solution works for what you're looking for. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure about you, Win, but I'm quite the perfectionist. And for me, I don't release anything if I would really want to make things perfect. So what I've always told myself is these are just notes for myself so that I can look back at it later and just copy paste it. And at any stage that I feel like most of the things are in there, it's never going to be perfect, but I just release it as a draft. And then
Right.
that's the thing I had to really move over to before because otherwise nothing ever got released, and that's really helped me.
Yes. Yeah. There's definitely a feeling of when is when is it good enough? And I think that the more videos I've done, the more I'm happy to go. You know what? No one's really going to notice that I made that mistake, or I'll just even leave that mistake in because it shows you're human. It adds a bit of color to it, coupled with the fact that I'm just a bit too lazy now to keep to keep spending hours and hours editing it. So that's what I tell myself. But
how's that going for you, Win? Are you doing the editing of your videos like personally, or do you have somebody help you with it?
No, currently I do the editing myself. I quite like doing it, and it does take up a fair bit of time. And it may be the case that I end up outsourcing that at some point.
Yeah.
But currently, it's the same thing. I just do it as maybe an hour or two, or maybe even more now, maybe 4 hours a week or something like that during work time, and then extra bits on the weekend and evenings and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, how about you? What's a 10-minute video take from start to finish?
A 10-minute video. Well, it really depends on. Do I first have a blog post written already? Yes or no? And if I have it ready on my blog already, then for me it's usually pretty easy to record the videos. I don't usually do re-recordings, so maybe if the intro isn't the way that I'm super happy about, maybe I'll just press record again for the intro. But really, for the rest of the videos, I just usually record it in one go, and I might just have some notes on my desk that say like, okay, we have like 4 chapters, and just the names of the chapter basically. So those 10 minutes, I think setting up the lights in the room and recording it might just take me like 25 minutes if I already have a blog post.
Okay.
Yeah, so
that's pretty good going.
That's not too bad actually.
Yeah.
But before I used to also do the editing like you, and I'm not sure I liked it as much as you do. Maybe you have a bit more of an
Right.
eye for it, or you do it during work time. But I used to do it in the weekends and the nights, and I
Yeah.
felt it was taking up a lot of time to get that all ready. Um, so recently, I actually found somebody that helps me with the editing, and some more
Okay.
videos are coming up. So for now, I'm just sending the instructions out, and well, and he's doing most of the editing for me. So I'm really really happy about that.
Yeah. I think it makes sense to do. Yeah, and it's probably it. I think it's inevitable that I'll end up going down that path, but not quite yet for whatever reason. But yeah, one day I think it's going to happen because yeah, it does take up a chunk of time. And while I quite like doing it, you're right. It just chews into your hours, and there's better things I could probably be doing.
Sure, sure. And you have a big following as well that likes the content, right? So if you could make
Yeah,
like twice the number of videos in the same time, would that be worth it for you?
that's it.
That's a good question.
Yeah, it is the question. So, and you know, it's really a sideline. Well, it has been a sideline in the past, but it's taken off a bit more now. So therefore, it becomes actually, you know, does this actually become something that I do focus on for a day a week or something like that? But we'll see. We'll see how it progresses.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's interesting though. So what setup have you got in terms of your mic and your camera and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I'm really happy about the current setup I have. I can show a bit actually. So I have a camera, like a microphone hanging here from Rode. It's the NT
Okay,
USB. Good thing about that one is you can
right,
just connect it with your USB, and it doesn't need an electricity socket outside of that.
cool.
So I bought this a little bit later because when I started, I just recorded with my phone actually.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So this one is usually just hanging here all week long, whether it's for Teams meetings or for any of the recordings on YouTube, and it's I think it's pretty okay quality actually. So I can
Yeah,
recommend
the
that.
sound is really good. Yeah.
Then for a camera, I actually also used to use my iPhone for this. But also for that one, I wanted to improve the quality of both the videos and to also get the Teams calls a little bit better. So a
Yeah.
few months ago, I bought a Sony A6600, which is a system camera that you can actually connect to your computer as well.
Okay.
So yesterday I was chatting with Brian Julius from Enterprise DNA, and we were discussing the
Yeah.
topic of getting like good quality for your webcams and your webinars as well. And well, we basically talked a lot about the topic of the Chem 4 links from
Right.
what's the brand again? Elgato, I think. I think Elgato sells those.
Okay.
So with that setup, you're really good to go to get your videos ready, your webcams, and of course it's a bit overkill if you're only doing Teams. But if you're a little bit of a geeky guy or a girl, you might just you might like getting one of those.
And I think what I'd say as well is, you know, don't wait to get all the stuff before you start doing videos. You know, if you scroll back at my ones, just using the webcam in my laptop, and that was it. You know, nothing, and just started just because I enjoyed sharing it, and
Yeah.
you look back and okay, the quality isn't great, but people got value from it, and I like doing it. And then if it, you know, you start, I think you should just start doing it, and if you enjoy doing it, then upgrade.
Definitely,
You know,
and most of all, it's really the audio that's important, right? Like a screen recording is going to
yeah,
be easy anyway, but does somebody really care
yeah,
if you are looking at them in 4K or if it's like 720p? I think
yeah,
I think people usually skip away if the audio is not too good because then it gets uncomfortable to listen
I'd agree.
to, and maybe you hear the buzzing out there. You might have heard that on
Yeah,
some videos around there.
yeah, yeah.
But then once you get the audio ready, I think people are just happy to watch. So get that audio okay, and well, with a very limited setup, you should be good to go with your smartphone even.
Yeah, I think that's a good tip. So what's your job now then, Rick?
It's a bit of a mix, but I'm during the week I'm consulting for a set of clients. So at this point, I'm working for 3 different customers, and I try to do that
Okay,
between the Tuesdays are my content days. So I used to also do this
right.
5 days a week, and I felt this was getting a little bit too much for me. So
Okay,
the consulting is now only 4 days, And I try to mix those days between Power BI consulting. I give training to teams to make sure they're able to make all the solutions themselves. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's most of the week really. So it's different consulting and,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
trainings that I try to do.
Yeah, same here. And does Excel come on the radar anymore, or is it all Power BI these days?
Well, it does happen sometimes, and one of the cool features with Power BI as well is the analyze in Excel part. So
Yeah.
the most often that I see Excel nowadays is often more connecting to an online data set, and then maybe juggling around a bit with the old school cube formulas as you might know them in Excel.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Nice.
And for some reason, people are always a bit scared to start with it. But once they see that you can actually get your Excel spreadsheet as custom as you want, just with the data from your data set, people get pretty happy. And the cube functions are pretty easy to learn. So that's usually something that
Yeah.
I try to talk to when people are a little bit handy in Excel, just to get them going.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it's a big difference, isn't it, now that it used to be that BI solutions or BI providers would come in and say, you've got to scrap Excel, it's terrible, you should get rid of it and use our system instead. And then they have an export to Excel button in it.
So bad.
Whereas now it's sort of, just use them side by side, and you don't have to totally replace everything. You can just gradually move, and you can still use Excel as well. And I think people are happy with that concept.
Yeah.
At least from my background.
It seems like that was one of the marketing strategies that people had before, to bash a little bit on Excel. Like, are you still doing everything with Excel? You should go to our tool. And there were even papers out there. I remember 10 years ago, it was already said that Excel was about to die. And I think even a friend of mine was worried that I was going to be out of a job at some point. And
Right.
and then I think it just turned out so differently, right? With all the changes they're making, and yeah, they're just moving with time.
Yeah.
So I don't see that
Yeah,
happen
it's
anytime
true.
soon.
Nah, those skills are here to stay for a long time.
And in a way, it's almost
'Cause,
like the most used formula language in the world, right? Like there's SQL and
Yeah.
all, but I think the basic users also know how to use Excel, and all companies in the world use it. It's like everybody is grinding to get those spreadsheets ready for, well, it's almost for free, you say.
Yeah, the need to get something out quickly, that's always been the trouble with the big BI solutions, is that they used to take 6 months, and then the business needs changed by the time those solutions were built. So everybody just, Excel was the practical solution, and you can be as purist as you want about, whether Excel's the right or the wrong tool.
Yeah.
It got the job done, and it gets the job done all around the world and has done for 30 years. So, to try and dismiss it and just say, it's wrong, or it shouldn't be used, or it's a bit of a sort of, you can have that view, but the reality is everyone's using Excel.
Yes.
And then Power BI sort of almost, rather than replacing it, pulls the users closer to the IT team, I think. Power BI gives you that closeness now that never existed before. It was very much a them and us, I think, with Excel, with IT. And I'm from the sort of business side, them and us. And now Power BI is sort of, everybody together, speaking a bit of a common language, I think. I think that's where it's coming to.
And with these new tools coming, like the tools like Power Query, Power BI, do you feel like a bigger audience of a higher age is attracted to it compared to, for example, the regular Excel? Like, do you see people aged 50 plus that are interested in trying to get into it more than they were into Excel, for example?
Potentially, I don't know. I think there's just some people, no matter what age, they're just interested in learning the best way of doing something. They want to explore. If they hear something can help them, then they want to explore it. And other people are just, this way works. Why do I want to change it? So it doesn't really matter. I don't think the age has an impact.
No,
I think
not
it's
in your
just an
experience.
attitude. No, not really. Because you are similar to me. You're an ex-accountant, aren't you?
Yes. I actually studied to be an accountant, and I worked in the field for about 6 years.
Okay.
And somewhere, well, in accounting, of course, they also work a lot with spreadsheets. And
Yeah.
and somewhere I just felt very funnel ways to do the automation parts. Like I remember at the first workday, I'd see like some Excel workbooks that were fully protected, and they were meant to do your tax calculations. And for me, it was like
Right.
I didn't even know back then how to protect your workbook or how to make sure those formulas were hidden and you couldn't see them or adjust them. And I just remember the guy who made this. Every time he walked by, I would just see some god walking by. Like I really admired him. And especially when you're like 18 years old, 19 years old, you don't even know where to start because nobody tells you how it works or well, you have these big books, right? Like the Excel Bible from what's his name again? John Walkenbach?
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't know about these until somebody introduces you to them, right? Nobody in school tells you like, oh, you should buy these books.
Yeah. Yeah. They're not on the school curriculum or even the university one, are they? They're just sort of, yeah. But do you? One thing I think that the remote working that we're all facing now is we lose that ability to see somebody else's spreadsheet as you walk past their desk, or for them to sit over your shoulder and do something. I think there's a big loss there of knowledge that it has to be more formal now, or maybe YouTube has taken over and that's the shoulder you're looking over. I'm not sure, but yeah, it seems to be a bit of a loss because that's certainly how I learned was by seeing other people's spreadsheets.
Yeah, and
just
well, you might have worked from home a long time as well. I'm not. What's your current approach to new projects then? Do you try to go in? Do you try to go into the office and sit with people, or are you really just taking anything?
No, initially we tend to meet with new clients and just sort of get an understanding of how they work and what their goals are and what the scope of the project and all that sort of stuff is. And then after that, it's largely remote. Yeah. But again, it can be totally remote potentially. It's going that way, I think. More and more people are just happier working from home, more comfortable with the concept, the technologies. So not as much value put on being in person as there used to be. It used to be extremely important, but not so much anymore, I don't think.
Yeah, I'm a little bit from opposite sides to that approach. I've worked home a lot, just like you, and of course my home setup is pretty comfortable as well. But personally, I feel I bring a lot more value when I'm around people, so I can overhear things. But also, you just have an easier chat around the coffee machine, for example.
Yes.
So as much as I'm possible actually to work from home. For me, I try to be in the office like every day that I can, because for me it's just a way to connect easier with people and to easily say like, hey, let's just grab a room and discuss this, compared to calling people on Teams, seeing if they're busy, are they actually understanding this, or am I misreading their facial expressions, for example. So personally, I found it very, very fun to go in, but there seem to be two camps here, right? People having their home situation with kids and not having any travel or commute times.
Yes, I totally get what you're saying. We definitely, when our clients were in the office, and this is the other side of the coin, is that there's no point in us going in when the client isn't there. So when they were in all the time, we were much more, encouraging of the team to go in and work with the clients and be in the client's premises. So it's a very, I think you're right. It's an important thing. You pick up a lot when you're in there sitting. I do miss that a bit, not being in and around.
And is your team you and your business partner, Win? Because I know you as one of the faces from Access Analytic, but is your team like much bigger?
So there's 8 of us in the organisation. So based in Perth. So we're solely based in Perth, in Western Australia, and so I joined the company 15 years ago. Company's been around for 20 years. We were Excel consulting, ex-accountants building Excel solutions, business intelligence dashboards for clients, but all in the Excel. And then Power Query came along and Power Pivot came along.
Yes.
And it was like, oh, magic. And we could have more power. And then, Power BI naturally came along and we just sort of migrated to that as well. So yeah, it's been a bit of a ride. I've been there 15 years now, so it's quite crazy.
Sounds like a pretty natural transition as well. And 8 people is a nice size,
Yeah.
right? Like you know each other well, and
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know what you can offer.
yeah. It's like got a bit of a family feel to it, and we focus on enjoying ourselves as well as working hard. So hopefully that rubs off. So where did you sort of come into the Power Query, Power Pivot? How did that transition happen?
How did that transition happen? Good question. Yeah, I actually chatted with a guy who introduced me to Power Query recently. We chatted recently. Power Query has been there for a while. And that was in 2016. In 2016, I worked for a software development company, and they wanted to use Power BI back then to offer their clients some way to see how their programs were doing. So the kind of programs they were offering was in supermarkets. So if you purchase a certain amount of products, you would get these little digital stamps that you could collect. And these stamps would allow you to get a discount on buying like a new knives or a pen, for example.
Right. Yeah.
And I think you see more of those programs right now, but in 2016, there were very little digital programs, and that's exactly the kind of product they were offering. So the company I worked at wanted their customers to be able to see like, okay, all of our customers, how many stamps have they collected? And where do we see most of them ordering their groceries at what time of the day? So Power BI was really like in its introduction times back then. And the team that was about to implement this, they would always sit with us with lunch, right? It was very normal to be in the office back then. Sounds long ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember talking to one of the consultants, and yeah, I was very interested about these things. And at some point he was like, "So Rick, why don't we just see if you can make use of this, in Excel and for your administration?" Because I worked as an accountant back then.
Yeah.
And I was a bit nervous because it sounded pretty complex and all. But then basically he showed me how things worked out. And well, whereas they were implementing this anyway, this allowed me to take a few weeks to try and automate some of the reporting we were doing. So a big part that he did was show me how to connect to the tables from the administration software we were using. And
Right.
every month we wanted to project like how many hours people had worked on certain projects. And what that normally would mean was we'd have to go and click the export button, export to Excel, and then make sure that we did a certain evaluation of those hours. But every month we would have to do the same thing. We would have to export the hours, we would have to make sure to allocate it to the right numbers, and we'd have to freeze it. And when he showed me this, I was thinking like, we had already made the process much smoother to do our month-end closings. But I was just imagining I could probably do this like in a third of the time if I was able to connect to this. And I didn't know how to do it exactly, but I just kind of knew that this technology was going to help me. And yeah, we worked on it for a bunch of weeks. And that's how I got introduced to Power Query at first.
Okay. And that was Power Query, but pulling it into Excel, so the Excel side of Power Query?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the first years, I haven't actually touched Power BI much. So it was all Power Query first. Then I resigned my job after 6 months of knowing this product. And I started consulting for myself.
Oh, wow.
And whereas you could find all kinds of roles for business control, you couldn't find so many business controllers that could also do a little bit of Power BI. And with that little bit of experience of 6 months, that actually gave me an edge over other applicants. And the first role back then was very much Excel focused with a bit of Power Query and also Power Pivot, basically.
Right, yeah. And where are you based?
I'm
Where are you living?
back then I lived in Lisse, which is 20 minutes from Amsterdam. But by now I'm based in Utrecht, which is 20 minutes to the other side of Amsterdam.
Right.
In the Netherlands, yes.
And what sort of clients? What industry are the clients?
So that the first customer I worked at was more in the retail business. They sold carpets, rugs, those kind of items. So it was very much about benchmarking stores, seeing what the sales were doing, what they did compared to budgets. And after that, it's actually been really diverse, right? Like some people get really industry knowledge, but I feel I've just been in all kinds of industry over time, which was fun in a way. But I never expected that you wouldn't need as much industry expertise if you had the technical knowledge.
Yeah, I know what you mean. We Perth is a big sort of oil and gas and mining sort of town, but and it does help if you know the terminology, so you can have a discussion. And when somebody the biggest thing is acronyms, just people using abbreviations for stuff,
Yeah.
so you know what they're talking about, and you can nod and just understand, when they're talking FID and things, you go, oh yeah, yeah. But otherwise, actual technical solutions, data's data, and you just need to add things and count things and build relationships between, tables and all this. It's the same. It's the process, really,
Yeah.
rather than
Well,
the users have the business knowledge, and that's the important thing about these sorts of tools, Excel and Power BI. The business users get closely involved.
if you're thinking about those industries, then what's been the most interesting industry you've been able to work in that just left a feeling of wow, that was different.
Oh, yeah, good question. What is like health stuff is quite interesting. Just going, okay, there's actually the challenges facing health departments and health teams with the type of data and the nature of stuff they have. It's really quite it's not Contoso. It is really weird, badly structured, stored data with multiple patients having multiple visits with multiple conditions. It just brings a real challenge to how to lay the data out and present it. So that's always been interesting.
I can imagine.
I'm trying to think if there's anything. We've done everything from slaughterhouses. There you are, to bring the tone down. So from places that do that sort of stuff to Wagyu beef farms to all sorts. It's just a total gold, miners. Yeah, it's a big old broad band of sort of clients that are based around in Perth.
Yeah, and
So it's been interesting.
it just gets really it sort of gets your curiosity every time you get into a new business, right? Like you get in there and it's
Yeah,
like, okay,
yeah.
how are things here? Are they very different, or is everything perfectly in order? And I have still to meet the first company where everything was perfectly in order.
I do find it funny that sort of everyone thinks these other companies have got these magical systems where everything works, and it's just not true. Even our biggest, blue chip listed companies, they're still playing around with the CSVs and Excel, and more and more of them are getting some nice SQL databases in Azure and stuff now that they can connect to.
Yeah.
But the vast majority is still, it's certainly department level. People are still having to deal with just nonsense data and old legacy systems and things.
Yeah, and then I see these very big customers as well. Like some, of course, are getting started, and I love giving training so they get the right experience to make use of Power BI. But then there's also big companies with a lot of users, and I was surprised one time to also come in and find out that I think they had over 500 workspaces. And each of those workspaces had probably like over 20 reports. And I was just thinking at some point, like, these people have such different challenges, right? Once you get to that kind of volumes, it's more about like, where do I find things? Is the quality good? How can we make sure we can control this, or where is this going? We don't want people to have to search through a library of, well, maybe each of them having like 50 workspaces available to them. And
Yes, and that's always been the issue with Excel as well, is that 45 folders nested 17 layers deep, and versions of Excel files flying around everywhere.
Yeah.
Which is a challenge that I think Power BI tries to confront. And I think with things like Data Hub and other discoverability features, Microsoft are trying to address that. I don't know how successfully that happens yet in the real world, but I get the concept, because everything flying around in multiple folders isn't great either. So
well, I mean, there's of course the idea of getting a central data model, but it's difficult. It's a big challenge. I
Yeah.
don't think it's even feasible for most businesses. And then the question is there any other tool out there that has managed to make it controllable in bits and pieces at all? Like, are there other tools that have done it? And I wonder. I think it's at some
No,
point there's
I think this.
so many different perspectives coming in, right, from every different user.
Yeah, it's that, and I think I've heard the phrase by Microsoft mentioned around this sort of flexibility at the edges. Discipline at the core. I think it is flexibility at the edges. So you don't want to be so locked down that people just go, well, I'm just going to do my own thing. Okay, because that's just what's happened forever, that people do their own thing. But you don't want it to be as loose as Excel has been in the past. You want to, I think Power BI is trying to find a middle ground, and it'll take time, but I can see the concept that it's getting there. Not perfect, but certainly getting there. It's a very hard thing to resolve, that flexibility.
Yeah.
And maintaining control as well. It's a really tough challenge.
It's like if you have a team of 10 people, you should probably be able to manage and have somebody control it. But then if you have a team of 500 people, how does it scale? How are you going to manage that?
Yeah, and which is the right file for me to, or report for me to look at. People just send so many as well that it can get a bit out of hand. So yeah, it's an interesting one. How do you sort of keep up to date with the latest developments and things? Are you books? Are you blogs? Are you following anybody in particular? What?
Yeah, so recently
What's your
I've gotten
approach?
more into the reviewing of books. So
Okay.
what I try to do when, first of all, a customer ends, like sometimes there's a new certification I want to get, and for the certifications they always recommend the books, right? Like I recently did the PL
Okay, yeah,
500, which was also about Azure Synapse, and there was a lot about the Power BI Premium features, and
Okay.
some of those things were topics that I never looked into, and the books really helped me into getting started with that. Now I'm also doing a collaboration with a team of professionals, so they sometimes can help me with those premium features too. So that's one way.
Okay.
And then even outside of the certifications, I have like books on the shelf. There's a few here, but in my other part of the house, I have a lot more books. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I always like to get to the details of the more difficult topics. So you can see me reading these kind of books in the
Right.
train, and sometimes you even find somebody in the train that works with Power BI, and then they comment on it, right? Like, oh, well, you're looking into Power BI, and it's a bit embarrassing and fun at the same time, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So for me, it's usually like reviewing books, sharing content that I bump into and try to figure out. But I have to be honest that I don't spend too much time on other YouTube channels or blogs. I just don't find the time at this point.
Yeah. It can be very distracting as well. You just sort of, there's so much. You just got to pick and choose which bits you want to follow. But yeah.
And where do you want to be good at, right? Like, I know some people
Yes.
are crazy good at getting good visuals, doing storytelling, and just making sure that things look so good I could never get there. Then, of course, there's the other part as well where you need to get your architecture right and to get your DEX calculations. And without the right numbers and results you want to see, the report is also not doing what it's supposed to do. So where do you see yourself in that role? And I noticed myself liking the difficult topics where it's like, how do I get the performance right? How do I get this very difficult calculation right in DAX, or how do I make it in Power Query? So it's usually aiming towards that side of the business. But I'm sure with your team of 8 in Access Analytic, you also have a division in there, right? Like what everybody likes, what they prefer.
Yeah, there's definitely sort of, different, slightly different sort of features that people focus on, but we're not admin level. We're not at the admin tier. So we're not talking about, system architecture and how to implement it at an enterprise level. That's not our bag. We're more at a business unit, train the staff, help build dashboards and reports, give some advice on structure and all that sort of side of things,
Yeah.
and actually build Power BI reporting. And I think we've sort of one or two of the team sort of are focusing more on the visual side. One person's getting into Deneb a bit more and doing that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I like the visual side, and I've got a bit of a focus on there. Obviously, the Power Query side of things, the DAX is a necessary evil, but we have to get in there and use that when it's correct.
Yeah.
Our clients generally haven't got massive data sets. We're not talking millions, hundreds of millions of records. We're talking maybe a million, maybe a million, maybe 2 million rows of data is all the maximum somebody wants to analyze, and normally it's less than that. So it's much sort of smaller scale. Even for the big organizations are basically just made up of small organizations, little departments. So that's who we focus on and help those folks out.
And there's a lot of projects that need that kind of level of expertise, right? I think most business users are in that area actually.
We have like a bit of a broad, breadth of skills across that sort of implementation of or build of a report. And you have to know, you have to know enough Power Query and enough DAX and enough visualizations to have a good result. And then people can specialize and go in depth in all of those for tougher solutions. And sometimes you spend, a day writing a Power Query, and other times you write a day writing a couple of DAX formulas. It depends on the scenario. And then next time you do that same thing in half a day because you did it once already. And you just learn, and we all progress and get better. Or we should hopefully.
Yeah, definitely. With time, things come back every time, right? Like at some point, it's like we have some challenges for one customer, and other customers are going to have the same kind of questions. Which is why a YouTube channel like yours or any blog people are writing, they're so good because people can relate to the kind of challenges. And why not share that knowledge with everyone, right? Why keep it for yourself if everybody can pick it up? Like.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of some selfish pleasure in that. You getting if you get one or two nice comments back from doing something and a couple of thumbs up, it's just like, all right, somebody's found it useful. I feel like I sort of paying it back because I've learned from all these people who've shared as well. And it feels like you sort of you're actually contributing towards that whole piece. That I'm thankful for other people who are sharing. So I feel like I need to share. As well.
As somebody once also told me there, like, why are you giving away all this information for free, basically? And I really feel that giving back to that community, first of all, it makes you feel good too, of course, because I'm happy to help. The second big thing is you learn a lot from sharing, because once you start writing or talking about a topic, you might just realize while you're explaining, like, ooh, do I actually get this as well as I thought I did?
That's a good point.
And then I think a third big one that maybe people don't realize is even if you would share all the knowledge you had in small little nuggets, people are never going to watch all of your content anyway. And how are they going to get all those things together, right? There's always still people needed to piece everything together. And then if there's somebody who's very ambitious and wants to do everything themselves, well, isn't it great that they now can? And if they can't, then they can get some extra help from people like you and me.
Totally. Yeah, I fully agree. I asked that question of Minda when she was on the podcast.
She was here
last season, and because her business is purely running training online, and it's like you're offering this content, and so you're really competing with yourself to some extent. But it's that view of if people value your content, they'll be willing to pay for it in a structured and more in-depth, and also you're paying for the interaction with the trainer as well, because there's internal blogs that people can then post questions to, and Minja will get back to them, and all that added value. So there's value to be found, and it's a good sort of way of marketing yourself to some extent as well. So there's pluses for everybody.
It's for everybody.
Everybody wins from it, I think.
Yeah.
So in terms of Power Query then, so that sort of, you said somebody introduced you to it, and that's your first encounter with Power Query. And then you say sort of in the introduction that your favorite feature is Power Query functions. There's a bit of a leap in, how did you pick this up pretty quick, or was it a nice steady straight line of learning, or what was your experience?
I wish I could say I picked it up right away. I wish. No. The truth is, actually, in the start, I thought Power Query was quite difficult. Because back when I started, there was no IntelliSense. So every time you would write something, you'd have to have the capitalization right, first of all, which I never did. I always misguessed where the capitalization should be and the dots in between.
Right.
But also I would get a lot of errors, and often they were either data type related or related to a spelling error that I made.
Okay.
And well, whereas those were still pretty clear at some point, right? So at some point you're trying to compare things and it's saying stuff like, you can compare text to an integer. Okay, let me figure that out. It would be a little bit annoying sometimes because Excel would just have a guess at what it should be and it would handle it gracefully. And Power Query is a little bit more explicit in that way. So that was a big reason for frustration in the beginning. But I think what I thought was more difficult at the start was that at some point you might make a change in some part of your query. Because in Power Query you have all these kind of steps. And at some point you might think like, I want to just change something at the start here. And in the beginning I had a very difficult time finding the right way to make those queries robust. So that if in the future I would get like new data, or there would be an extra column added to your database, for example, how could I make sure those queries wouldn't break down? And really, I know Chris Webb had a book released back then. I think it was called something like Power Query in Power BI and Excel. And he was really one of the first people releasing a book, and there was not much else out there. So yeah, there were a few blogs, but there was really not too much back then. So definitely, it all started out with a lot of struggling. And then I think the biggest leap that I took in that beginning was when Ken Pauls released the book, the M for Data Monkey part. And when he released it, I was like, this is very helpful, because he would go into depth with exercise files. How can you merge different items? How can you make sure your data gets appended to each other? All those kind of topics that related to the work that I was doing, he would just write it out in the book. And I don't remember which year that was. I think it must have been like 2018 or 2017. But that's really when things took off more. And I guess that was how the beginning started. No advanced editor, all just user interface and clicking and dragging.
Totally.
And of course that's like the start, right? So in the beginning it's user interface things, easy stuff. But before you get to making the functions, I think I only started with that maybe like a year ago, not even that long ago.
Yeah.
And those functions really became necessary only when, especially when certain things were missing in Power Query. So when I felt things were missing, I could rebuild certain functions. And then instead of having all that code in your query multiple times, I felt like it was just a fun way to incorporate that in a function and just call that function multiple times. And
yes,
I think it was Shil Raviv who introduced me to that in his Collect, Combine, and Transform book, which you might know as well.
That's a book that I read on the train every morning.
Oh, you did?
We're talking about train reading books, yeah. And probably had some weird stares at me going, what's he reading? But yeah, nobody came up to me and said, hey, you've got a Guild's book.
Now, and of course, those parts where you create functions, it makes sense that it comes later, because it actually combines the usage of all kinds of logic that's already in there, and then you need to know a little bit on how to translate that into a function and how you can call certain lists or tables. So all the concepts really come together before you get to the functions part. So it would make sense that is one of the last parts in your Power Query journey.
Yeah, I do like the fact that Power Query has this ability to sort of lead you through this learning journey itself, because with functions you can actually do couple of clicks and add a parameter and create a function with, it's not all button clicks, but it's a lot of button clicks. Mm-hmm. So, and then you can start writing it from scratch after that. And there's this nice, it's just really well built, I think, that it leads you through these things with clicks to start with.
And for example, there's this book that I have on the shelf here. I'm not too good at it yet, but it's a book for learning Python. And if you compare Power Query to Python, for example, what I really like about Power Query is that each of the steps that you take, you can actually see what's happening. So if you delete a column, you see it disappear. If you want to just have a quick preview on how to do text from delimiters, that's okay. And you can even go back certain steps. But then if I look at Python, it feels like you have to run the whole script, see the result. Well, then maybe if you want to check until the previous step, you also run the script until that step. And it's not as easy, I feel, as the Power Query interface is helping people.
Yeah. There's little things. It's amazing how you take them for granted now, but it is a really powerful thing to be able to see where you're at, especially if you inherit somebody else's file or code.
And
the ability to walk through click by click is just, that's something that was always missing in VBA. I used to program in macros and all this sort of stuff, and you couldn't really do that. You couldn't really see what was happening. You could sort of step through it with the F8 key and see a screen change, but that often had its own issues. But yeah, Power Query is just there, just running through. It's good.
And what I like best, like last year or so, I was giving training to a team, and before the training, I remember one of the managers saying like, "Okay, we would like this team to pick this up, but there's a few people where we're like wondering if they're going to be able to follow or if they're that interested. So just give it a go and see what they're like." And what I thought was a lot of fun, there were also a lot of older people in there, that everybody was so happy to see what's happening. Like, click, oh, and is this really what I'm going to get output on my Excel sheet now? Like, if I do this, do I get everything capitalized with just that button? I'm like, yes, it's that easy. You just click and it gets you your worksheet. And she's like, so all that work that I've done, all those hours every week, I can just do it by clicking now? I'm like, yes. And after you're done with it, you just refresh and next time it's done. And also the people that, my customer was wondering if they were going to pick up, they also picked up and were getting very happy about the Power Query results. And for me, I'm still looking back at that with a big smile and thinking like, hey, this makes such a big impact for people.
Yeah, I think Power Query trainer is just one of those jobs that almost shouldn't be paid. It's just it's just rewarding. Don't tell anybody. Don't tell any clients. But it's just so much fun to actually teach Power Query, and because people just get it, and they immediately see the benefit of using it.
And of course, I wonder, like, I'm coming from this financial background, so it's always been a lot about budgeting, getting the consolidation ready, making sure your spreadsheets get certain numbers in there. But I'm sure if you come from a different field, it's also going to have the similar kind of benefits, but it just might have a different perspective to it on what kind of data you need or how you want to output it. But I'm noticing it's just giving such efficiency to budgeting processes as well. And I think it's wonderful that got released, and it sometimes hurts to see that so little people use it.
Yeah, I know, but we're all doing our bit, right? We're all doing our bit, so we can look back and say, hey, we tried. We tried to tell people about it. Have you sort of, what would you have a guess of most time saved with a Power Query process? Any major time savings, or
maybe I'd have a guess with my record and coming in somewhere. I remember coming in at a customer, and I think I was there for like 1 or 2 hours. And for some reason, I got to talk with somebody who was really into the Excel part, because I got introduced in the first round, right? Like, this is Rick, he's going to help us with these things. And then he was like, oh, but I'm working on this stuff. And actually, during lunch, we were just having a quick look at it. And it cost him about, I think, like 4 or 5 hours every week to get this ready. And that first week, we already saved him those 4 or 5 hours by automating this right away. So I felt like, those first 3-4 hours seeing the problem and then fixing it by the week after, that was one of those examples. But to then quantify it on the general image on all the projects? I think that's a difficult one, Win.
Yeah, no, it's those single use, case examples. I think are really powerful.
And
You just go, this was causing somebody a lot of hassle, probably stress, probably boredom, all this sort of stuff over and over again, and then you've fixed it in a fairly short amount of time.
also, for some reason, the time that you save, it always seems to fill up with other things again, right? Like it's like, okay, I'm done with this like 2 hours earlier now, but it's not like you go home 2 hours earlier. It's like, no. We now have more time to do other things that we might enjoy even better. That's what I usually think. Because I think the data cleaning and doing repetitive work, it takes the fun out of it after a while. So if you can automate that and focus on the more challenging and maybe the stuff that brings value, it fills up time, but it's valuable. So I think that's really what happens.
And you also, you end up giving yourself more time to learn more stuff, because there's no end of how much better you can get. There simply isn't, So you can just get better at whatever you do, and if you freed up some time to learn some more, then you're just going to get better again and better again, and you're just adding value to your employer, you're adding value to yourself for your future. So I just think it's
So what would you say, Win, to people who are like they don't have a lot of experienced users yet, and they're afraid to train like 1 or 2 people to learn this, because if they would really get good at this, they're afraid nobody else would understand. What would you tell people that are afraid for those scenarios?
So the argument of don't use anything complicated, and I put double quotes for people listening, air quotes. So don't do anything because other people won't understand how it works. I think from a Power Query point of view, it is pretty straightforward to understand, and I'm a fan of using as many steps as possible to make it as easy to understand, rather than making it maybe even faster and shorter to write, but more condensed and harder for people. The same thing with Excel formulas, the old classic of building some helper columns rather than building a mega formula. I'm a big helper column fan to help with the logic. But just that sort of concept of not building something because somebody else won't understand it. I don't know how you assess what's too hard to understand. People need training in Excel and Power BI. They just simply do. And clients who don't implement training or give staff training are just, shortchanging themselves. And it's a weird one. People, I think they know Excel. Power BI is a bit different now. More people are coming on training because it's a totally new thing. But people think they know Excel and the features of Excel, because nothing obvious changes just from the user interface. Nothing. There's maybe another hidden button somewhere. But you're just missing out as an organization if you don't train your staff in the day-to-day technology they need to use. I'm biased. I'm a trainer, so take my comments with a pinch of salt. Anybody that's listening.
At the same time, we don't ask our employees to have the same skills as our CEO, right? So in a way, wouldn't it be okay already if 2 or 3 people had that expertise? So of course it's not a one-person thing. And then if anybody leaves the company with some of that knowledge, well, then you find somebody else and you train that person as well. So at least you get all those time savings, you get the insights that you need. People are going to like their job better. And does it matter that not everybody knows? I'm not sure. I don't think so.
It's a good point. Having at least 2 folks who know a technology that you're implementing, as a bare minimum, is a very sensible approach. Otherwise, you're in a bit of trouble sometimes. It's something that I just posted something on LinkedIn today about it. I was thinking, Power BI gets all these communities of practice now. People come together in teams on a Friday afternoon and have a power hour, or have a monthly session where they talk about Power BI and things. I was just thinking, why has that never happened for Excel? Why aren't there? Given Excel is so broadly used, why aren't there?
That's a good question.
Monthly
has it never happened? Like I have never seen it myself either, and I mean, I
Yeah.
wasn't always
Well,
the Excel guru out there who was blogging about it. That was only recently. But were those communities anywhere? There were like these
not
championships
that
usually,
I've.
I think,
Not,
but they never had like these games before,
yeah.
had they?
No, and it's there isn't that. I think because Excel's grown, so wide and so broadly, there's not like an Excel approach. People are using Excel for their shopping lists, and people are using Excel for financial models and for BI reports, and
Yeah.
all these different uses. So there's not necessarily a common user. Whereas I think Power BI is a bit narrower in terms of its focus and its audience. But no, there's never been an internal. I've never known of a company to have an Excel, get together. We've run Excel workshops and lunch and learn sessions for clients that we've said, hey, would you like us to do one? And we've done them.
Yeah.
But we've never, I've never heard of one from a client going, oh yeah, we already do one. It's just like, some people on LinkedIn were commenting that they run them, and I think that's brilliant.
And
But yeah, generally it doesn't
I
happen.
guess maybe it also has to do with the part that the video conferencing, I think, has become much more accessible for people over the recent times, right? Like whereas Skype
Yeah.
was the thing before, I don't think as many people knew how to use Skype, and maybe they used it to call abroad, like for long distance calls. But I think in the beginning that it even cost a little bit of money, and it was
Yes.
just not as accessible for just everyone. Whereas since the last 2-3 years, everybody is online as they're set up at home. So maybe that has something to do with it as well.
Yeah, maybe it should take off. Start campaigning for it.
And
Okay,
okay.
so it's time to have a little game. This is the just a minute game. I don't know if you've heard anybody else playing this
No, I
yet.
haven't.
So it's where we have to talk for a minute, okay, which is quite hard, and I get an advantage because I'm native English speaker.
Sure.
So I'm already got an advantage here. So the topic of the conversation, or not really the conversation, but your speech about this topic is creating a date table using Power Query. Okay. So creating a calendar table, a date table in Power
I know a
Query.
little bit about that.
So the idea is that either you can start or I can start. It's up to you. And then if you hear me repeat a word or pause for too long, you buzz in, just say buzz, and then you carry on the conversation. Okay? And then if I hear you pause or repeat a word, so if you say the word, you're allowed to say the word calendar, table, and Power Query, because that's the topic. So you can say that a couple of times. But if you said data type twice, or you say step, applied step twice, I'm buzzing in and taking over. Okay.
No way.
Whoever's speaking at the 60-second mark is the winner. So it's only 60 seconds. Okay. So I think I'm about 50-50. I can't quite remember. I've lost about as many and I should be getting better, but I'm not.
Okay.
Right. So I'm getting my phone out. So on the topic of creating a date table, in Power Query, do you want me to start, or do you want to start? Totally up to you.
Why don't I give it a start so I can see when you interrupt me, because that might be a tricky one,
Okay.
right? And I think you're
you just
you're
gotta-
focusing mostly on the nouns, right? When you're saying I say something twice, like we don't look at words like
Yeah,
that, so it's
yeah.
more like the big topics.
No, that would be really
Yeah.
Yeah, the big nouns. Yeah, so I'm trying to pick up, and I'm not very good at spotting them either. But so I'll do my best. Or really big pauses, or if you say I can buzz in. So you just got to speak slow and steadily.
Gosh.
That's the art to this.
Okay, sure.
But not too slow, otherwise that's cheating.
Okay.
Right, hold on then. Let me get my little timer going.
I'm feeling a little competitive now.
Okay. I know. Right. So ready, steady, go.
So any of your Power BI reports can benefit from getting a calendar table. In most projects that you work, a table that contains your dates will help you in making your time intelligence easier, but it can also leverage relationships between your date table and the rest of your model. And you can make a query to generate that calendar table in several ways. One of the ways to do this is to use the list dates function that allows you to give a starting date that needs an amount of steps that show how long your calendar will be. And it can then indicate also how big these steps should be. These could be a single day.
Oh, Buzz, you were doing so well. You said steps twice.
Okay, your turn.
So that was you've actually got the furthest anyone got. You were at 50 seconds, so I feel quite bad. that I buzzed
Talk quickly, Win. Talk quickly.
So yeah. Right, so you've got 10 seconds to buzz in if I mess up. Okay. So a calendar table can have years, months, days, week number, all these sorts of columns that you can use to slice and dice your report by those factors. 60 seconds up.
Yeah,
so
we have a winner here.
I feel bad.
Well done, Win.
That was a great run. 50 seconds was impressive, right? So that is,
Okay.
you've set the record there for, and I don't think I missed any double ups.
Okay.
So
Thanks.
congratulations on
I could have
setting
done
the
another
record.
30 minutes on calendar tables, but the words, the using words twice, that was a difficult one.
They're so important. Calendar table, Power Query or DAX?
Power Query. For sure.
Me too. I obviously it's where my comfort zone is, but I just feel it's more flexible and and again easier for people to add an extra, or me to add some extra columns onto and stuff like this as well.
I
Just
released
feels
a
a bit
blog
easier.
post on how to make your calendar in multiple languages, and that means both for
Okay.
the column names, but also for the values in your columns. And I was thinking, how am I going to do this with a DAX calendar table? That's going to be quite difficult, I think.
Right. Yeah.
Especially if I want to just give a parameter to people and say like, okay, I want to have this in English and then have everything in English. And then I choose maybe Spanish and have it translated to Spanish, all of it. I'm not sure. I was missing quite some features, and certain custom functions were also easier to leverage through Power Query, I felt. Whereas in DAX, I don't even think you can create functions, can you?
I guess you can sort of potentially loop through something, and you can have if statements in there, but not something that can, you could potentially have something that iterates down a table, I guess, but it depends, as always.
Okay.
But no, I just go Power Query. Easier.
And
So anything missing from Power Query or Power BI or Excel or anything currently that you'd vote for? Have you got anything in the ideas forum, or you've got any thoughts
Yes.
about improvements?
Yes. So I'm working a lot with Power Query, and a lot of the code that I use repeatedly. And what I would really like is to be able to save some sort of library with your personal code, so that if I, for example, have 30 functions that I regularly use, I don't always want to go back to my blog post and copy paste it back into a file. So I would really like it if there was some kind of way to create a library that you could call upon and then have that library come into Power Query. And anybody else that then wants to use that, then imports that library, expands it with what they need. That's something that for me is really missing, and would really make the product a little bit better.
Yeah. Yes. And do you know if there's a ideaspowerbi.com sort of thing to vote for that one? I'll search it up if you're not sure.
I might have to look
And
that
then
one
I'll
up,
post a
because
link.
I'm not fully sure if it's there.
Yeah. There must be. I think it sounds like a grand idea. I think I've heard Imke talking about it at some point as well. So
It reminds me a little bit of
sounds like
the external tool from Greg de Groot, where he also has like quick measures that you can copy paste into your DAX. And I think something similar should work for Power Query as well.
Because way back when, initially, there was a Power Query catalog in Excel. You could click some button and upload, but I don't know if that's the same thing or that was something slightly different. I never really played about with it, and I think it got scrapped after a little while, but sounds like something that'd be useful.
Yeah, it
then.
doesn't ring a bell to me either, but if that would come to exist, I would really enjoy that.
Yeah. And sort of where's the best place for people to sort of find you and link LinkedIn, your blog, Where's the best spot?
So if there's any topic that you want to discuss or have questions about, and it's related to a blog post or YouTube video, I always tell people, just put a comment below that video or blog post. And if you feel like you want to connect and follow any of the contents that I provide, you can either sign up for my mailing list on gorilla.bi, or you can follow me on LinkedIn, where I actually post a lot of things, and well, we can interact, if you want to have a short discussion about a topic, we can have a chat. So I'd probably say choose LinkedIn, or if it's any topic related, you can find one of the videos or blogs.
Cool. And you became an MVP this year, yeah? Is that right?
That's right. This I think it was March this year.
Yeah.
Feels very special.
Pretty
still.
Cool. Yeah. Hopefully, there's sort of an in-person summit in the coming future to get everybody together as well, because that's always was always a good.
Wasn't there always something happening like in Seattle once a year as well before?
Yeah, in March.
Maybe next year.
I got to go to two of them, my first 2 years, and then COVID came and stopped it. But
fingers crossed. Who knows for the coming March then?
Fingers crossed, indeed. And did somebody nominate you for that?
Yes. It's you might know Mark Proctor from his website Excel Off the Grid, and we've been in touch quite a bit before. And at some point he was like, Rick, I think with the content you make, you'd make a good MVP. And he offered to nominate me for it. So that was great.
Oh, excellent.
And it took a bit to upload all the contents for it. They had to review it. But then I remember really well, I was gardening in the backyard, and for some reason I picked up my phone to check something in my email, and I remember that the message came in back then, and it almost felt like a graduation party, right?
Right. Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah, it was good fun.
It's a good community to be part of. It's fun. So before we wrap things up, I like to ask my sort of guests if they've had any brushes with fame. So have you met any famous people or got any famous connections?
Do we have any famous connections in the Excel world and Power BI world? Yes.
And then the real world? Not that isn't the real world, but...
I'm afraid no. I was thinking about that really hard, Win, but no. I don't think I've met so many famous people. I mean, I go to concerts and all.
I've
been to a Coldplay concert, but we never shook hands, so I don't think that counts as much.
No.
So
you haven't got a famous uncle that developed something, developed the suspension bridge or anything like this? Nothing.
Nothing of the sort. I'm still waiting for the day where people recognize me, when I'm on vacation. It's like, oh, that's
yeah.
But
you're the famous.
But no, I don't think I met anybody famous, unfortunately. I still hope to at some point.
Any hobbies?
Well, some might not know that, but I'm a lot into salsa dancing, and I'm currently in the advanced salsa class. Okay. So I go to salsa dancing like twice a week, and there's a lot of socials going on here. So whenever I'm not doing any Power BI, I'm usually dancing.
Salsa, awesome, very good. I did a quick Google of your name, and a whole bunch of Ricks popped up, etc. Yeah. But one I think might be you is via Mixcloud. Does that ring a bell?
I might have a mix.
And one of the songs on Mixcloud, it might not be you, right? But one of the songs on Mixcloud that's pinned as one of your favourites is You Gots to Grill, Volume 11, Let the Chicken Hit 'em. Does that ring a bell?
Well, I do have a Mixcloud account,
but
this one doesn't ring a bell though, so... I could go ahead and try and listen to it. I'll comment under your YouTube video if it's mine, but it doesn't ring a bell actually.
It's some crazy song. I'm going to send you a link to it. If it's you, I'm leaving this in. If it's not you, I'll edit this bit out.
Okay. No, I'm not sure if it's me. I'm not very active on Mixcloud. I do have an account, so who knows? It might be mine. But let's see.
It just popped up. It's just random. So I've also been asking people about their worst presentation moment. Have you had any horrible blue screen of death moments? Or
yeah, I had a very bad one, unfortunately. There was a day, I think it was 1.5 years ago, and I was preparing to give a Power BI training to a team, And when I came in, there was first a barbecue, and after that barbecue, well, it was more of a dinner, a bit of barbecue as well. But after the typical food, we went into that room with, I think we were with maybe 15 people. And well, I took, of course, my laptop and all the presentation material that I needed. But for some reason, I decided not to test the materials before we started. So I remember wanting to start everything, and everybody was like ready. It was like, okay, Rick, are you ready for it? I'm like, yes. And then we tried to connect my laptop to this screen, and for some reason, the technology failed. Like, it wouldn't connect to my laptop.
Oh,
So then they tried to connect that
right.
laptop, the connection to another laptop, and it worked. But of course, I didn't have any of my training materials on there. So he was like, okay, well, we
Right.
still want this training to happen, right? So at the spot there, I had to log in like first on my OneDrive, transfer everything. Now I have these crazy passwords in my LastPass account. So I was trying to type that over, and that didn't work for like 2, 3 times with the whole crowd watching, you know? And I just
Yeah,
felt,
yeah.
a little bit nervous there with the whole crowd looking at me. And I think it took a good
Yeah.
15 minutes to get that fixed. But then in the end, it was a great training.
LastPass is brilliant until you have to type that password in somewhere.
Exactly. And usually you try to have it on different
And the fix that.
devices until you get to somebody else's laptop,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, totally.
So I guess that was
Oh,
my
that's
worst training moment so far.
very good, very good. And one of the requirements of coming on to Power Query Magic is you've got to leave 2 of your own articles or videos, your favorite and your most popular. So what are you going to leave with us?
Okay. So my most popular article on my blog, it's actually about DAX, even though I blog about Power Query all the time. So I could make my most popular Power Query one as well, but my most popular one at this point is calculating the last 12 months in DAX, where I show like 12 different ways on how to do it, just to show that DAX is very
Okay.
flexible, right? There's multiple ways to achieve the
Yeah,
same
yeah.
thing. So that's one of my most popular ones. And one of my favorite ones is a little bit geeky maybe, but I have a very elaborate blog post on list functions in Power Query. And I think I
Wow.
wrote almost 14,000 words on this maybe. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but it's like a very, very long post with almost all of the list functions there are.
Yeah.
And then I illustrate on different ways and how you can use it. And I had a lot of fun making it, because making these posts, I have to delve into each of those functions. And of course, you learn a lot from looking at it. But then putting the examples out there on a single page, for me, it also made it very easy to browse if I wanted to find a solution. Like, it was just one long single page for it.
Right.
So I'd say that is one of my favorite
Yeah,
posts
yeah.
that I go back to a lot.
Excellent. Excellent. Sounds good. I'll have to check it out. We'll put links in all the show notes
Thanks
and
so
everywhere.
much.
So yeah, make sure you share those with me. And finally, we're going to strand you on a desert island. Okay, it's a remote island. It's not a luxury resort or anything, and you can have one luxury or item with you, but it must begin with M.
Yes.
What are you taking?
I've thought a lot about this one. And yeah, when I was thinking about this, yeah, I generally eat quite healthy, but there are times when I just turn into a different person. And one of my guilty pleasures is M&Ms. So you might know the moment where you're like, okay, I'm just gonna head out and maybe just grab one hand of M&Ms, you know? And when you're having those thoughts, I usually feel that there's a certain person inside of me thinking that. But then after you grab like a hand of it and you have this taste of it, there's totally a different person coming up after that, because that person that thought to just have a hand, it just completely disappears. There's a completely different person out there. And I just can't help myself sometimes. I just eat these whole bags all at once. So I think if you would send me to one of those islands, I'd go for a huge bag of M&Ms.
Yes, that's a good call. Endless supply of M&Ms. Awesome. All right. Well, it's been brilliant to chat, Rick. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks so much. I also enjoyed it, and I do hope we get to meet in real sometime. That would be great.
You know, I hope we can all get together at some point. Maybe next year as well. I might start traveling around a bit more. So maybe some conferences over in Europe. So you never know. We'll hopefully catch up at some point. But yeah, thanks again for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks, Win.